When we talk about education, in this case, the history of school desegregation, the Supreme Court decision Brown versus Board of Education in the 1950s is the iconic judicial ruling that finally helped bring children of all backgrounds, all walks of life together. However, not everyone is as familiar with Mendez versus Westminster. Mendez v. Westminster was another crucial court case that preceded Brown versus Board of Education that helped pave the way for that decision and subsequent desegregation. Now, some history. In 1947, parents in Orange County, California won a federal lawsuit against several California school districts that had segregated Mexican-American school children. This unprecedented case introduced evidence into court that school segregation could basically destroy the future of children. Now, we introduce, or in some cases reintroduce you to the award-winning documentary Mendez versus Westminster for all the children. This 75 years after that groundbreaking decision, these days the Mendez case and the documentary are ever so significant in today's controversial education narrative all throughout the U.S., which we are going to discuss in detail later in this broadcast. First, though, we begin with a historical tour of some of the places in Orange County that helped set the stage for Mendez versus Westminster. In 1943, farm worker Gonzalo Mendez and his family were living in what was then the predominantly white Westminster School District neighborhood of Orange County, California. Gonzalo Mendez had relocated his family to this Orange Grove farming community, seeking opportunity for work and for education for their children. Gonzalo Mendez found that work opportunity when he leased a 60-acre farm in Westminster from a Japanese family who had been relocated to a Japanese internment camp during World War II. That business agreement allowed Mendez to go from farm worker to farm boss. However, the education opportunity he was seeking for his children was an opportunity of misfortune when he was introduced to segregation, the segregation of Mexican-American students. Gonzalo Mendez and his children were denied admission to their local public school on 17th Street. Gonzalez knew, even back then, when activism was not common in Orange County, that he must do something to try and effect change. The Mendez family used all the money they earned farming to help them hire an attorney and organize a class action lawsuit to take legal action against a district for banning their children and other kids from their school. In 1945, Mendez and 4 other plaintiff families filed that lawsuit on behalf of 5,000 Mexican-American children to integrate the schools in 4 Orange County school districts. Those districts were Westminster, El Modena, Santa Ana, and Garden Grove. That precedent-setting case here in California was a significant step in furthering the 20th century fight for equality for all children to get a good education no matter what their race, color, or ethnic background.
So I have been passionate about seeing that Mendez is taught in all of our schools because it really shows that we are one, that every voice matters.
Some 20 years ago, a journalist from Westminster read about this story of school desegregation in her hometown that she had never known about. The story prompted her to find out more about this unheard of legal battle. What began as a simple quest for knowledge morphed into dedicating the next 20 years of her life to try and let the world know about Mendez versus Westminster.
Hi, I'm Sandra Roby, the writer-producer of the Emmy-winning documentary Mendez versus Westminster for all the children. Mendez tells the story of the 1947 Orange County school desegregation case that helped to pave the way to the Supreme Court case Brown versus Board of Education and helped to make California the first state in the nation to end school segregation. I used to drive around talking about Mendez versus Westminster in my 1967 Volkswagen bus. Looked like this, because nothing says peace and love like a Volkswagen bus, and that's what I want this story to be about, a story of celebration of how far we have come. But I stopped driving my bus when I started feeling like I was riding a skateboard downhill without a helmet, because there is nothing in front of you if you're the driver. This is it. So today I'm going to be taking you on tour on my new wheels. I've got a Razor scooter and a helmet. We got a story to tell. right now I'm standing in front of the Cypress Street School building, which is in the Cypress barrio of Old Town Orange, California. We are just 4 miles from Disneyland, and this is a school that only allowed Mexican children to attend. This school was opened in 1931 specifically for Mexican children. And in fact, if you can imagine orange groves all around here, that's what was surrounding this place, because this was the heart of Orange County's citrus area. In fact, just down the road was the packing house. The orange groves were all around here. And behind us, you can probably hear railroad bells, because the train came by here. They always said, if you're looking for the barrio, look for the railroad tracks, because that's where they're going to be living. All the workers, all the industry are going to be really close to the train. And this is where the children of those pickers attended school. So if you go around and visit the houses here, some of the families actually have relatives who attended the segregated school. And when you talk about segregated schools, everybody's experience is different. The folks that attended this school, I've spoken with some of the folks who were children, and they said that the teachers were very nice. But there are other schools down Chapman Avenue. There was the Lincoln and Roosevelt School. The Lincoln School was for Mexicans, I believe, and the Roosevelt School was for whites. And at that school, if you spoke Spanish, you were punished with a beating. That's the reality of what segregated schools were in California. So for the students out there who are watching this, I want to ask you, as we go on this tour, to think about your neighborhood. Are there any old buildings, old churches, old theaters that you have driven by? I want to encourage you to dig into the history of those buildings, because often the stories we tell on these tours, historic tours, is about the architecture, the exterior. I want you to see what went on inside these buildings. That is the real story of all of us. Okay, so we are here in front of the Orange Theater in Old Town Orange, California. Okay, so the Orange Theater was segregated. Mexicans had to sit in the balcony and Anglo sat below. And this was typical of theaters all across the United States. So what was really powerful here in helping to change segregation that was happening in the community is World War II. World War II was a watershed moment in American civil rights history, because we had soldiers of all different colors fighting across the globe to end injustices, and then come home and face segregation. That wasn't happening anymore. So the way that segregation ended at the Orange Theater, a Mexican-American soldier from the barrio came to the theater with his friends, bought a ticket, and rather than sit up in the balcony, which was the Mexican section, he took a seat on the main floor. And immediately an usher came up and said, "Excuse me, you have to go to the balcony. That's where the Mexicans sit." And he goes, "I'm not going." He said, "Well, if you don't go, we can't start the movie." He said, "Well, then we'll all wait." He said, "Well, if you don't go to the balcony, I'm going to have to get my manager." And the soldier said, "Go ahead, get your manager. I just came from fighting Nazis in Germany. I'm pretty sure I can handle your manager." So I always ask students, who was the bad guy here in this scenario? Was the usher the bad guy for trying to enforce the rules that the community held? Was the Mexican soldier the bad guy for trying to stop the segregation? That is the power we have each and every day to make a decision that makes justice possible and equality possible for everyone. And that is one of the huge lessons for me in Mendez versus Westminster and studying the segregation history that took place all across this country. Okay, are you with me? Is this fun? I love this stuff. Let's do this. We are at Hart Park in the city of Orange. It was established in the 1930s with monies used from the Works Progress Act that was created during the Depression. So this old pool was a segregated swimming pool. Monday was Mexican Day. That was the only day that Mexicans could swim in the pool, and then the pool would be cleaned, drained, refilled to make it available for Anglos after that. You want to hear the story about how the segregation ended here? Again, it was tied to World War II. And there were about 90 families with Latino soldiers fighting in World War II. And they weren't allowed to come into the pools on Mondays. So finally, the whole barrio came down to City Hall and they said, "Look, we've got uncles, fathers, brothers, cousins fighting to end injustice in Europe, and you won't let us swim in the pool? They said, you know what, that doesn't make any sense. And that is how integration happened at the Hart Park Pool. Our history books always talk about segregation that happened in the American South, that it was only a black and white issue. But the story of Mendez reveals so many life truths. Among them, that the American civil rights struggle is about each and every one of us every day. 2, that history is so much bigger and deeper than what our books can tell us. And 3, we are all connected. We are one, and every voice matters and makes a difference in our freedoms and the future ahead for all of us.